this week's special edition of our webinar series with the one and only Zoominfo. My name is James Ski and I'm the CEO and founder of Sales Confidence, and our vision is to build the world's most valuable B2B sales community. We simply could not do that without the qualities of support of a company like Zoominfo. Zoominfo have absolutely staggered the market in the UK and Europe over the 12-18 months. There's so much of their offering that I think you're going to be blown away learning about today. And not only have we got people championing them, but we've got the likes of Grant Coleman, who was voted the #1 top sales leader in 2021 on the call today. This is a fantastic lineup. I can already see David, Andrea, Luke dialing in. Let us know where you're dialing in as we kick off this event. Remember, the main event is going to be taking place over at the stage. From our perspective, we're going to be covering positioning your sales teams for effectiveness, and Zoominfo are the experts in reaching your target prospects. You want to be able to connect here with them and shed some light on the sales learning journey at large. For us, Sales Confidence, we care about helping you win. We care about helping you win from a mindset performance perspective, a well-being perspective, and also a performance perspective. And we do that by combining leadership tools and strategies, talking about how to build a high-performance team, how to build effective territory plans, how to reach your prospects, and understand the power of effective coaching. And I'm really delighted we've got the likes of Ali Z. Syed, who is the Director of International Revenue and Growth from Zoominfo, Mark Percox, who is the Director of Customer Success from Zoominfo, and also, as I said, the top 50 #1 sales leader from 2021, Grant Coleman, CRO now at Messageberg. The way the agenda is going to flow today, a little bit different than usual. Irene, Derek, Charlie, Derek in there again, is we're going to have Ali come up with Grant to begin with. Then we're going to have Ali be joined by Mark, and then Mark and Grant are going to share a little bit of a summary after Mark's talked about his Rev OS. The whole concept is that you take away some key learning points and that you get some knowledge that you can apply directly into your business. So the first speaker that I'm going to invite up is Ali Syed. Ali, how are you doing?
I'm very well, James. How are you?
Superb. Excited to have you on board. We've had you on stages. We're soon to have you in a podcast studio, and today we've got you in the webinar. So that's very cool.
Yeah, very excited to be here. Thanks for inviting us in. Today's session is really going to be about, the first session that I have with Grant is to talk about specifically how to build high-performing sales teams in certain economic downturns or in the environment that we see ourselves in today. We see a number of challenges at Zoominfo, as I'm sure we also hear about a number of challenges from our customers that we're looking to solve through the technology services that we provide, but also as well from a consultancy-led approach about how we do things in our business, given our go-to-market expertise, are specifically around not just about the tools that we have, but also how to use them, and also how to build off the back of that to build those high-performing teams. So, James, we can pull in Grant whenever you're ready.
So do you want to do that straight away, or do you want me to fire off a few questions first, Ali? Do you want to...
Sure. Feel free to fire off a few questions, yeah.
So I'm thinking about your experience from where you're coming out from building successful sales teams. So we've got both of you in there to help with the questionings. Hi, Grant. Great to have you on board.
Great to be here, man. Thank you very much.
You've both got very broad experience working in large companies as well as scale-up companies. So the first question I've got is, can you tell us about your experience building successful sales teams in the past, and what were the key factors that contributed to their success?
Ali, do you want to go first, or shall I?
Yeah, I can jump in there. So I think one of the things that I've learned, it's like there's no perfect art when it comes to creating a highly successful team. Really, what you have to do is, first of all, understand the environment that you're in, that you're operating in, the business that you're with as well. There are going to be certain aspects in that business that would be extremely different to how operations happen in the previous business. So whilst that wealth of knowledge you can bring with you, it doesn't necessarily dictate that what you've seen success with in the past is actually going to deliver success in the future. So you really have to pivot to the times that you're in. So I think that's really, really important. On top of that list, I mean, generally it would be going out to find really, really good salespeople that you'd kind of have a great CV. But actually, you know, my view on this has slightly become nuanced and slightly changed, where actually I really think about culture really, really deeply, and trying to understand the culture that you're trying to build within a sales organization. And then once you kind of have an outline of that, you're then really looking to try and build a skill set off the back of those to be able to enable you to action certain tactics or particular strategies that you're going to market with. And you just build off of that. It's a learning curve on any new area of business that you're looking to lead, whether that's a span of control where you've been promoted to a higher level, or you're going into a new organization. You really need to take each of its component parts to be able to figure out what's right and what's wrong. There is no particular science behind building specific teams, although there are theories that you can use to help you apply those.
What are your thoughts, Grant?
Yeah, thanks. And I got to echo what Syed is saying. I mean, what I would add is I think connected to that culture really is a belief in what we're all doing, what we're all striving for. So I think as early as possible in the creation of your sales team, if you've got an established business, it's about figuring out who your champion customers are, what their use cases are, and how they derive value. I find if you spend time making sure that that value is understood by everybody in the sales team, that you connect that client success team more directly with your sales team and they understand the points of value, they become more excited, more motivated. They become braver in their approach to prospecting and more confident when they're out there, more situationally fluent when speaking to prospects. And I find that that kind of shared view of a mission, and if you can get to the point where the salespeople are more thinking about how their job is to communicate the value that they know customers get, rather than what's just learned in a book or in a presentation slide. And this, if you can get past that, you can get really a different kind of motivation and a different kind of energy behind your team. And then I would say just thinking about how salespeople tend to think. So the clearer you can make sure that the expectations known for them are, and the more barriers to actually doing business, which is hard enough anyway, especially in this economy. If you can get rid of those barriers and clearly communicate how you're making doing business with your prospects and your customers as seamless as possible, then again, you remove everything that can constitute to demotivation. And so much of what we do as sales leaders is try and drive momentum and build momentum. And that comes from that belief, that culture, and just making sure every point of inertia that you can control, you try and remove or minimize.
I love that. And I think that expectation management is critical. People need to know where they're at in the organization, especially through this sea of change that's happening all the time. And it's really helpful in terms of structuring that organization. Great responses. Thank you. How do you balance the short-term needs of the business with the long-term goals when developing that sales strategy? And what steps do you take to ensure that the team is focused on achieving both goals, short and long?
Shall I go first this time?
You can go first if you like.
So for me, I think about goals being long-term and strategies and tactics being short-term. So your goal might be that you want to grow your business by 50% next year, and that's the goal for the company. But then you have to get into what are the key strategies, i.e., I need to improve conversion rate by from 20% to 25%. I need to decrease days it takes to close. I need to increase average order value by X%. Those become the strategic things that help you meet those growth goals. And then you need to figure out what the tactical things are, and they become super short-term to improve every single one of those strategic things you're going to do to hit the goal. So goals are long-term. The goal is always there. You're never thinking about that goal. You set that goal and then you think about the strategies to get there and the tactical things that you have to do. And then you'll come down to how to enable the field to sell better, sell faster. How do we remove process problems? How do we create automation in our selling cycle to do this? How do we review the way that we forecast and predict? So you will then do a bunch of tactical things, and it's the tactical layer which becomes the short term. The goal is always long term. And so really, the seller's not thinking about the goal. They know we have a goal. And then they know that the leaders are trying to figure out the strategies and tactical things, which are then shared goals. So those tactical things, there's an expectation on the sellers. There's an expectation on marketing. There's an expectation on product. Those become shared, unified goals around the organization with the sole mission of making sure that we can grow. So that's the way I think about long-term, short-term. It's actually goals are long-term, strategies and tactics are short-term, and they should be super measurable. And you should always be looking at things and the KPIs that drive towards the goal.
I just want to thank the thoughts that are coming in from Kevin, Ron, and Luke. We will capture those later on in the conversation. But Ali, have you got a response to that, or are you quite satisfied with what Grant has said so far?
Well, I think what Grant said is really insightful, actually. I'd never really thought of strategies in a short-term approach and then kind of separating it and combining it with tactical execution elements and then looking at your goals as a longer-term piece. So I think that's something definitely that I will take away to kind of consider how we can look at that. But just separately on top of that, just to kind of like look at this from a different approach when you look at short-term versus long-term approaches, I think, in any sales organization, revenue solves all problems. And I think where this becomes a challenge, particularly with making sure that your sales teams are efficient, both short-term and long-term, is removing obstacles out of their way. What you tend to find in organizations, or I have historically as well, is that when you're having challenges with delivering outcomes or goals, we become more internal and we focus on reporting internally up the chain, which actually gets you out of the way of the customer, which is the exact opposite of what you should be doing. So one of the things that I tend to do is that, particularly from my senior leadership team, is to try and create a bit of a barrier there when we are going through those challenging times. And, everyone will go through them, whether it's on a monthly basis or quarterly basis, is to remain as that filter to enable my sales team to continue to go to market with the tactical plays that Grant's been talking about, to execute repetitively. And sales, arguably, in the short term, should be really boring. The process should be really boring. The fun part is actually executing on the deals that you close. Like when you can jump up, you can hit the gong, whatever your approach is to when you win a deal and how you celebrate it. Those are the fun tactics that you do in the back end. That's what makes a good salespeople great, is that they have a repeatable motion. And that's the thing that you really want to get across to the rest of the team members as well that are struggling, to be able to help them up that growth curve as well.
It's a hard thing to articulate, but I remember the GM for Europe at LinkedIn had this philosophy about being brilliantly boring. And I was just like, how can you be brilliantly boring? I want to smash my number. I can't be boring, but over the years, it really resonated. And I started to understood what he meant about the mechanics of having brilliance around your process so that you could drive outcome and drive your goal. So very helpful. Just moving on now, how do you identify and prioritize, this is for everyone, key target customers for your sales efforts? And what criteria do you use to determine who you should target first and who is the most important to target?
So I can jump in here first, Grant, if you don't mind. Grant's remit is obviously going to be a much larger span than what I focus on within our international markets. So really for us is that as an emerging business within the EMEA markets, we are looking at various different things. We're looking at historical data. We take the US data to help us understand where we're seeing success and look to see if there's opportunities to replicate that in market as well. So really what you're effectively doing, first of all, is, for us, every single company that has a sales arm in their business is a potential new business customer of ours. So really what we're trying to identify is readiness, willingness, and then the drive to be able to have the integration into the technology services that they need. So we look to really build ICPs around those specific triggers. And, at Zoominfo, we literally drink our own champagne here. I mean, all of our systems are built off the back of all of the 35,000 odd customers that we have are built off the back of the tools and the services that we go to market with as well. So once we've developed an ICP around, for me, I generally look at the upper mid-market and enterprise segments of our business, is to really look at what those clientele are looking for. What are the problems that they're looking to solve? A lot of the time that's around tech stack consolidation. It's around automation. Those are the areas that we look at, that we talk about, and Mark will go into detail later on, is around our RevOS or Revenue OS platform, and how we're looking to tackle things across a breadth of challenges and not just specific pain points, but but looking to consolidate all of those challenges that customers are facing with, and then really create a discovery process around that, consult on it rather than trying to pitch for the pain. Great
response. Thinking about sales teams' motivation, I think Grant will have an answer on this one based on what I've heard about him. And this is away from process, which I know you understand more, Ali, from a technology perspective. It's about the people. Like how do you make the people and have a great culture within a sales organization? So you've got a culture of high performance and continuous improvement in your businesses.
So I think this is where your ability to communicate with your team in a way that remains authentic and remains a dialogue is really critical to how you create that culture. So every single week, I'm speaking to every single rep, not necessarily one-on-one in an organization like mine, but at least in their teams, in their team concepts, in the team constructs. Making sure they understand that my job is not a position of hierarchy where you can't find me, you can't get me, that ultimately my job is to make them as successful as possible, and that I share in that success and I'm completely committed to their success. Making sure they always understand what is happening within the business, what's coming next, the things that we are doing to solve the challenges that they've been able to share. And obviously what that means is there needs to be a dialogue in place, i.e. they need to be able to share the things that are holding them back, the things, what would make you twice as successful right now? Where do you find you get most frustrated internally? How much corrupted selling time is there? So these are the questions that I spend my time asking in the field. And then the work of my forecast calls is to figure out what is within our control that I can personally, or somebody else within the senior team or a different department can go remove a block. Can I jump into a call? And once you see that kind of shared responsibility manifesting in actions, not just it's all on the sellers, but actually the whole company is behind our shared view of growth. You tend to drive that better connection with your sales team. They just become more motivated. They see that this is not just them on their own. It does take a village. This is not an easy game that we've all picked. And I don't think there's any seller out there that's worked in the SaaS space for any amount of time that thinks they did it all by themselves. They didn't depend on sales engineers. They didn't depend on legal. They didn't depend on finance at times, executive sponsorship, everything it takes, and obviously a great product with the right innovation curve, everything it takes to sell, making sure that all of the company's muscle is moving in the same direction. That's the single biggest thing that I've found has changed motivation. You have to therefore create the space for that dialogue and make sure that you get credit for what you're actually doing in the back end. So much of what we do, no one sees. And that means the feedback that they gave you 3 months ago, you may have done 6 things that impact that, but you didn't find the time where you actually told the sales team, you told us this, we went and did that. And now it's better because. So don't let the things that we're all working on every day, which are very back office sometimes, the further you get away from that customer, for us as sales leaders, the more miserable it gets. But then you get that, when you see the green shoots and you see the organization becoming more successful, that's where we then get our kicks as leaders. So I think that's the biggest thing I can suggest for motivation. Create the dialogue with your team, be authentic, don't be scared to share your problems and where we're suffering and where we need to get better. And then make sure the things that we implement that you get credit for, because all too often they just happen, we do them and they're just sort of brushed under the carpet and no one ever wants to talk about them again, but they take a huge amount of effort and a huge amount of people. So that's what I would say.
Love that sentiment. I think that's fantastic. I'm just mindful of time, Alice. If you don't mind, I'm going to move through to the next slot and then we'll bring you back on the end with Grant to answer more questions. Is that okay?
Absolutely, yeah.
Cool, awesome. Next up, we've got Mark Percox, who I mentioned already, who has got deep understanding and perspective on the customer strategy and customer base of the customers over at Zoominfo with his previous experience. So, Mark, I'm going to invite you up to the stage to kick this off.
Thanks very much, James, and thank you for the opportunity. It's an absolute pleasure to be here today. And talking about the macroeconomic climate, it's very much a burning topic amongst many of us professionals at the moment, especially within the technology industry. So over the next 10 minutes, I'm going to take a deeper dive alongside Grant to learn about more on what MessageBird has endured and what processes they've put in place over the last 12 months to adapt to this changing economic climate. I feel like I'm a bit in awe now, speaking to a sales award winner for a company that over the last couple of years, you're one of the few companies.
That was 2021.
But we wrote off a lot of the year after that, right? I mean, with the whole COVID piece. So it's a pleasure to talk to you. And I think that the audience are going to take a lot of insight from yourself in terms of how MessageBird have adapted as a result of it. And so as we want to get down into it, I represent customer success. And from a customer success perspective, we think a lot about customer behavior. And so the first question that brings me to is, what have been some of the biggest differences that you have seen in terms of customer behavior over the last year, and as this microeconomic climate overall has unfolded?
I think we need to think about the changes beyond just the macroeconomic climate, because there are several things that have happened over the last couple of years. We also had a pandemic. We also went from a very in-person way of working, lots of physical meeting with customers, to a very virtual one. Now, customers don't get together as frequently now. They tend to be more virtual, as we are as selling teams as well. And there's been, whether we realize it or not, there's been an adaptation to that. So we've all had to change slightly the way that we go about selling. No, it's all too infrequent now. And people that have been in this game for a while will know that going into a big meeting room with a group of people, team on your side, team on the customer side, there's all kinds of visual clues, there's signals, there are interruptions that happen, there are dialogues that happen because it's an in-person event and people feel a certain amount of comfort, versus people coming off mute, people not even being on camera sometimes, distracted by whatever's on Netflix in the background, and all these other things that can be going on that can disrupt the selling motion and make it that much harder. So not only is there that, but at the same time, this is the first time we've had this type of economic situation, which is becoming much more, things are getting tighter. People are getting more worried. People are concerned sometimes about a real situation, and sometimes people are fearful about a future situation that could occur, and they're just being more mindful about all of their spend. At the same time, they're trying to make decisions in a virtual way. So, and some of these investments they're trying to make for the first time, they may be buying something in this format or making decisions around consolidations for the first time ever in a much more virtual setting. So we need to think about both these things. But look, the main difference is, of course, what we're seeing is a drive towards more efficient costs. Anything sold in a per seat model is under some pressure because there could be less people on the customer side. We're seeing customers having more seat change. They're losing people, and then people perhaps that were more senior before now have to crank the handle of some of the technologies that we're selling. And so we see a lot of people needing retraining, and you don't want to miss that opportunity. If a customer's asking you for training, that is an opportunity. If you refuse that or put a commercial barrier there, I would urge you to think about that, because otherwise you put at risk that customer just not really engaging with your technology, not relearning, and then find another tool. And there's much more drive to figure out how they consolidate, because if there's less people, there's less ability to manage multiple vendors. That becomes, it's actually not a conversation of, is there value in your technology? Obviously that's part of it. It's that they struggle to even manage the amount of vendors they had perhaps 2 years ago as they explode through COVID and they started using different technologies for different things to answer different concerns. They're now in a position where they're having to think about how many pieces of technology can we actually run simultaneously based on our new headcount reality or the way that we're now working as an organization.
Yeah, I think very good answer. I think that we're also seeing a lot of that in terms of the fact that right at this moment in time, there's a lot more customers that are coming in and questioning what tech they're using overall. You find the decisions are going up to a much higher level now than they have been before. Things that are much lower in ACV dollar having to get signed off a lot higher up. And I think it is allowing a lot of vendors as well to really give the opportunity to ask, what value are we bringing as a vendor, as a partner towards that individual customer? And I think you're absolutely right when it comes to customer training. We're seeing far more people question the level of training that they've had, the level of training that they need, what is specific to them, how to tie it back to specific use cases. And we need to jump on top of that. And I think that is where it's not just, I represent customer success. It's not just customer success's role on our own. We all play a part in making sure that our customers are trained and they're able to use the platform and to get the value out of that. Now, staying on the topic of customer behavior, How have you found that the changes in customer behaviour have impacted your sales strategy as you've gone into 2023?
So there's way more than one thing that we're doing to deal with this change. But I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to make sure that the process itself becomes slicker in the virtual reality. So our demos have to be more pointed. The problem statements going into any meeting need to be really fleshed out in much more detail. There's a pre-mortem, not just a post-mortem of a meeting now. So it's like, are we prepared in the right way before, not just what do we learn after doing? They have to both happen now. So we actually need to create the space to make sure that happens. But also, you always have to figure out who the real buyer is. And as you said, decisions around investments are now being made in most cases by a CEO and or a CFO. And then often the CFO is becoming more powerful. And even if the CEO is like, yeah, I'm supportive, the CFO can still say, look, reality is we can't make any more technology investments, or we're not ready to do this, or we already have a technology that does that, and I don't care if it's inefficient, we're stuck with this. So be ready to figure out, if you can't speak to that person, how to enable your buyer to have the conversation with that profile, which means you have to be super succinct, super clear on the value created. And I think you mentioned this. And that's why don't miss an opportunity to create value with the way your technology is used. And if you've got a new user who's been maybe at some point aware of the technology, but now they're forced to use it, make sure that you've got a process for onboarding that person quickly and supporting them, especially in the early stages as a new user. If you lose them, you lose any chance of being a champion, and you won't even have the ability to have that conversation to educate them as to why they should keep that value. So if you can't speak to the persons that make the decisions, be ready to create the content and the business case that person will need to use to justify why they need to spend more money.
Yeah, I love the term pre-mortem. I'll tell you, that might be something that I think about bringing back into our side. It is equally as important as going up the back of the meeting and looking at the post-mortem of what happened. So definitely resonate in that sense. And I think that goes back to your early conversation with Ali, where you were really talking about how do you have those transparent conversations with your team, and to say, what worked up until now got us to where we are. But to get us that next step, to get us to where we want to be, we have to continually evolve. We have to continue to implement that growth mindset. And I love the concept of pre-mortem. Said that before. So when it comes to an effective sales strategy, many companies are prioritizing a leaner, more efficient workforce that relies a lot more on technology to support them in their prospecting. Can you talk us through some of the initiatives you have implemented to ensure you're getting the maximum output with the capacity that you have?
So, I mean, there's actually a few ways of answering this question. So first of all, we're relying on technology, but we're trying to rely on less technology. So the same way that our customers are also thinking about how they consolidate their stack around a smaller stack, we're doing the same, because what we've found is we are struggling to manage otherwise the number of different technologies that we use. But then what it forces us to do is the technology we have left, we have to use at a much deeper level. So rather than just using, because what we've had the luxury of using kind of like a best in class for that little function. Now we have to get the most out of the fewer technologies that we have left. At MessageBird, we've got a slightly different opportunity, because we have technology that also allows us to automate. So we can connect what our technology does and the flows we can create for automation to technologies like Zoominfo to make sure that we drive more automation. So that before somebody gets a lead, the what's in that lead, how we connect content and information, demographic or whatever it is about that company to that lead flow, and get it routed to the right person and make that as seamless as possible, so that we can then meet our SLAs by how quickly we then follow up with those leads. That speed, that urgency, but with the relevant detail, is something that we also can do on our own with the right partners. So of course we have the tools that allow us to drive sales cadences and things like this, but actually it's about using fewer technologies in the deepest possible way. I think that is going to be, how we become more productive and efficient, because then we have fewer sources of data then to connect to help measure our teams. Because what had been happening is we got not only big as a sales organization, but the amount of technology that was being used, there was no consolidation of how's it all helping the journey. And then we found that certain regions were using this product quite well, but then other regions were not using it at all. So those things, they resulted in hard decisions, but let's then make sure that there's a unified strategy for how we use the technology we have left at the deepest possible level.
It's a very good point, because otherwise you're struggling with that many tech vendors out there to really think about how is that impacting your overall customer experience, customer journey. So thanks for that. And then I think the final thing from my side, the audience are usually very interested in hearing about KPIs and how KPIs have adjusted. So when we think about measures of success for you, how do you feel that your priorities and the KPIs that you use to track those tactical priorities that we spoke about before and tying those back into the wider long-term goals, how do you think they have changed over the last 12 months?
So I won't talk about message board context here because I've only been here since November, but I will talk about something that I think is pretty core to my way of building my sales organization. I've never had the luxury of working at an organization where it's growth at all costs. I've always chosen to work for companies where it's much more important to grow sensibly with the right growth number, but then strategically and in the right way in order to make sure that we make this. So, but what I've seen now is the whole community is now focused on things that make things more effective or improve effectiveness, efficiency, productivity. Those are the numbers we're trying to drive. And I talked about some of them before. We're only going to get so many deals. So how do we make sure that we get the highest average order value? How do we control discounts? So before you may have allowed reps to give X amount of discounts, a quite a high percentage. I would urge you, if you haven't already, to make sure you put more controls in place to reduce those numbers. Because honestly, once you've managed to get to the point of sale, your ability to hold your value is probably no longer competitive. Once they're buying from you, they may still use a competitor to send against you and to drive your price down. But once they want to talk about that kind of number, they likely have decided on you. Hold your discount percentage to get a higher average order value. Do whatever you can to reduce your days it takes to close. So find those points of inertia. Look at your sales velocity, your opportunity velocity. What stages are you getting stuck in and why? And what can you do as an organization to improve that? What can product do? What can marketing do? What can we do as sales leaders? What can legal do? Whatever that is, look for ways to reduce that inertia so that people can get past the opportunities. Because what happens invariably is once reps get busy with a couple of opportunities that are going to close, they stop creating pipeline and they get stuck in the same opportunity. If you can knock 20, 30 days off of the 90-day average sales cycle, it will do wonders for your business and your ability to create consistent pipeline and get that through. And honestly, that's a controllable area because there's so much corruption internally now. Work on that to help improve that KPI. I mean, everything that drives towards these efficiency measures is pretty much where everybody is focused right now.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And James, I think that's good timing. Good to see you back here. Grant, it's been an absolute pleasure hearing your experiences about how you are changing and adapting in this macroeconomic climate. So thank you. James, over to you. You're on mute, James, I think.
You're miming.
Super amount of insight. We are going to get you on the Sales Confidence podcast as well because there's a lot of gold being dropped there. For now, we're just going to let Mark take over for a few more moments before we bring Ali and Grant back together to wrap it up. And I know Luke, Ron, Kevin, there's a bunch of questions. We will get those answered there as well as any other questions that are coming through.
And now I'm going to spend the next 5 minutes after hearing from Gary to really talk about this world's first revenue operation system and how this connects to those main business drivers that you are focused on, whether that is reducing cost, increasing revenue, or mitigating that business risk. With RevOS, we are really bringing together that best-in-class go-to-market data and insights that sit at the core that you can see here in the blue circle cloud and creating a suite of orchestration, enablement, and engagement software that is designed for you, go-to-market professionals, to achieve business goals. That is why we take the first layer and we put that at our core, which is very much our data cloud. Within the data cloud sits the firmographic and the demographical data, which consists of more than 100 million companies, 235 million contacts, and 1.5 billion data points every week. We're able to take this level of information, this level of data, and provide insight into it, which enables you, for example, to think about when you ask questions such as how many vehicles does a vehicle company have within them? What was the last round of funding that a potential company may have had? What new technology have they acquired that we may be interested in as we build our ideal customer profile? We can take all of these common data points and we put that at the center of the data cloud, which really enables you to start thinking about how you engage with the right client, or the right company at the right time with the right message. We impact that by applying on top of it contact information. Think about your job titles, your phone, your email. But the data isn't all. What we're able to do with that data is turn it into a set of research products that you can take action upon. Think about first and third party intent. How do we know what potential prospects are visiting our website, especially those that didn't sign into the application or those that started to fill in a form and then they left halfway through, maybe because they got some advertisement to go somewhere else? We're able to connect using software within this application suite back either to the contact or to the company that was primarily on your website. We can use intent data to really start connecting back which companies are in the market for specific topics that they are researching on. We can use tracking information to start monitoring actual companies that may be of interest to you, or we can use scoops to see the latest news as and when that's made available. But the powerful piece of all of this really enables us to take all of that data and to take it in such a way that we are able to automate a lot of that outreach. And we heard a lot about that before from Gary, of how do we use almost less technology and more automation. With workflows, we can start to look at those questions that we asked before, such as how many lorry vehicles, or can I find a contact from a specific lorry vehicle? We can take that and we can automate it. And we can basically put that into your outreach application that can start off that engagement and discovery for you, giving back time that would otherwise be spent in prospecting. With engagement, we are able to add additional applications to your go-to-market endeavors on top. We're able to do an outreach application through Engage, so you can start to really end-to-end automate that outreach program. And we can use conversation intelligence that can be used to monitor whether that's new staff that you've just hired, new sales managers maybe, new sales representatives, customer success managers in my case. You're able to listen in on them, coach them, give them guidance, make sure they're sticking to the onboarding or the enablement plan that you've got. And when we take all of this data and the orchestration and the engagement tools and we put it on top of a Revenue OS suite of applications, we start to come together with a unified data set that both Marketing OS and marketing and sales teams together can use. Now, I want to take you back for a second and think about some pain points on your side. Imagine how many times you personally have been on a website, or you've been on social media, or you're on Google, and you receive an irrelevant advert. And at the same time, the amount of emails that you get in a day that are cold emails that are not relevant to you, or phone calls that you get that are not relevant to you. The point there is, while they might not be relevant to you, they may be relevant to somebody else in your organization, which is where the power of the data cloud really comes to its core. Imagine if you're able to take that and you're able to help your marketing teams, your sales teams. I'm sure within your own marketing team right now, they have ad spend that is being wasted because they're not targeting the specific companies that are in the market, searching for those topics that matter to you. I'm sure you probably have sales individuals that are sitting there as SDRs that are spending large amount of hours prospecting, whether they're using LinkedIn, whether they're trying to find a phone number, whether they're doing all of that outreach that they've put together and they've sent an email to a potential prospect, but they're just not getting any responses. Imagine being able to automate all of that using a consolidated tech stack, whilst at the same time having your marketing and your sales teams work from the same set of applications. And we can even add on top of that this talent piece that enables your human resources to start finding the right people that are either looking for work that fit the criteria that you're after, with the salary caps that you're after. And most importantly sits the operation piece. Think about how much time you spend in your CRM, making sure that data is enriched, is kept clean, is deduplicated, is ideally updated in real time without ever needing to leave your CRM in the first place. Operations OS gives you that ability. And so you can see, as we bring this back to the overall RevOS suite, we are very much building a set of go-to-market applications that make it easier for you to drive those efficiencies and to be more effective whilst having all of your teams work from one consolidated piece of tech and one consolidated data cloud, so that you do not have dispersed solutions across the organization.
I think this is really powerful, particularly powerful for the UK and European market, to see how well the consolidation stack has taken place, and that you have the best of breed all under one roof, which is really, really exciting. We've got a couple of questions I'd like to bring in. Do you want to ask a couple of questions and then I'll bring in the questions? Is that how we should do it?
James, why don't we do the questions now?
Okay, let's do that.
We'll go off of that, yeah?
In your eyes, what's more important when building a sales team? Hiring correct or onboarding well?
I mean, that's a tough thing to choose between, isn't it? Like, so I think, look, hiring is not an exact science. So you can agonize over it, and actually a good hiring manager gets it right instead of 50-50, 60-40. And that's their edge. They figure out through instinct and through the right questioning how to get it right with slightly more frequency. But even a great hire will still need a high quality onboarding journey if they're going to be successful as quickly as possible. So if you're interested in reducing your ramp time and figuring out how to make sure that consistently, especially if you're working for a company with a high innovation curve, that you're constantly re-enabling and re-onboarding that team with whatever it is that you're producing and whatever ICP you're going after, like that's never something that should stop. And so I think probably on balance, if I had to pick between one or the other, onboarding, because even if I'm the best hiring manager in the world, I'm still getting it wrong. I don't know anyone that's got 100% success rate in perfect hires. But
okay, Ali?
Yeah, that is a really tough question to answer. I mean, onboarding is really, really important. I think you're hiring, it depends on what you're hiring for. I think one of the things that I look for when I'm hiring for new salespeople, it's softer skills. My expectation is that my recruitment team, I have given them enough information and enough context to be able to bring me a right group of candidates for me to start interviewing and to meet with and to have a conversation with. So I'm expecting them to have the baseline expectations of what I want from them from a sales perspective. The softer skills is where I think it becomes really powerful. Grant, you mentioned things around communication are really important. The communications are all the way up the chain, from top to bottom, for leaders to give it to their senior leaders, and from ICs and sellers to also then raise up those, whether it be a concern or there's a risk in something, they're able to bring it to you confidently. The other area is self-development. One of the things that I have personally built my career on is my pure curiosity of wanting to know how things work, how things are built. And if some of you don't know, my background, I used to work for Google. I don't know how the hell I got a job there, but I had to figure out how to keep it. And I knew for a fact that I'm sat there with first-class honors degrees that I didn't have, who come from red brick universities or from Ivy League universities. I'm effectively competing with those individuals. So I'm curious to know who else is going to want to be able to succeed through their own self-development. If I'm able to test for those two things, the other things should come naturally with, natural inclination around being able to manage your day effectively through time management, how to get to grips with technology relatively quickly as we go through technology consolidations and the processes that we use. So those are probably, I would say, how I would answer that slightly differently.
Next question from Luke James. I'm interested to understand your opinion on building teams of remote workers, building teams with those that come into the office, or a hybrid of two. We've had this question for 3 years.
Yeah, I remember being on your stage in 21 in November talking about this challenge and I still feel the same way about it. If you have any chance of building, if you have to add people to your sales team, if you can't depend on the same 6 people that you've always had, never leaving, never needing to grow in anything else, you're going to have to add new people. And unless you've got the ability to hire somebody that knows everything from day one and doesn't really need a lot of help and support, there's going to have to be some in-person interaction. If you ever want to build a team of early talent that you can develop yourself, you're going to need some in-person interaction. I at least haven't figured out a way yet where a purely remote setup is going to allow me to scale an organization. It may allow me, I can run productively with what I got, but it's been a struggle to add. And I think at least some of the challenge that we've had during this time of scaling our teams and now seeing people have to scale them back has been that we weren't able to add incrementality, partly because of the onboarding journey just falling short. You cannot build that team spirit. Like everything we benefited from as sellers when we entered the industry, for anyone that's got any tenure or has lost all their hair like Ali and I, and so much of what we learned from listening to what other people were talking about, picking things up, just listening to a post-mortem after somebody came back from a meeting. It's nothing to do necessarily with that person, you sitting there right now, but you listen, you learn, you are able to question, you're able to ask for that presentation that was specific to an industry. Maybe your team go and target somebody who looks just like that customer because you're like, I just learned something there. I'm going to use that pain point. I'm going to sell someone else. These are the things that don't really happen in a virtual environment at scale. So I just don't think that unless you can keep the same size team with the same size targets forever, you're ever going to be able to be purely remote from this point on. But I guess we'll see how it progresses. Ali, over to you, man. I'll let you answer it.
Yeah. So I think, Grant, you're absolutely right. I think those micro moments that you benefit from having that in-office culture, you lose that. And there's no real way to capture that kind of essence that you have of cross-pollination of ideas when it comes to sessions like that. I think there are things that we can do to mitigate that in this type of environment. But I do have one solution for you, which is called Chorus. It's a conversational intelligence tool, a company called Zoominfo that deliver this product, and it's actually outstanding for onboarding and for best-in-class preparation for your rep. So I would definitely check it out.
Highly recommend it.
Yeah, but separately, James, just real quick, one of the things that I did wanted to add around remote working, it also opens up huge amounts of avenues for us. When I think about diversity and culture, when I think about women, single mothers, for example, who had struggled to be able to find the time to come into the office, it's opened up a massive segment of new individuals that we can actually recruit and bring on board, and to be able to find ways to be able to bring them into the work culture that we're trying to develop. So whilst I think it is a challenge, it does open up huge amounts of opportunity across diverse groups that we may never have really considered to be part of particularly for a sales team in the environment that we're currently at.
Fair points. So I'm just mindful of time. There were a couple of observations I think you had, Ali, with Grant that you wanted to come up at the end of this conversation. So let's take those, and then if we really do have a moment, we can take a couple more questions.
Sure. So Grant, I know we touched on this with Mark when you were having your conversation with him, was around tech stack consolidation. Really, what I would love to hear from you is that what that actually really looks like, because as a buyer of product, of technology, and a seller at the same time as well, leading an organization that's selling, how do you manage the gap of understanding what you need versus then how you're going to be able to grow yourself as an organization on those limited tools when it comes to consolidation?
I think you need to get back to understanding what baseline needs for execution are, like get really stringent about what do we need to function. And sometimes, like, there's definitely decisions I've probably made over the last, and have been made by the organization as well, over the last couple of months to get rid of the technology that we used that may not pan out to be smart, but we're using it as a forcing function to help us consolidate. And we can always add at any point more technology. That's not a problem. But it's not just been about budget reality, although we've had to address, look, we're spending crazy amounts of money on technology here. And some of that crazy was also because we thought we were going to be a bigger team. So it's like cut, but then also cut again because you think that we can really live without this. So first things first is to get back down to the basics with your core group and your core technologies. So for example, Zoominfo, I can't live without that, because otherwise making sure I can get access to the right data, produce the right lead reports, the right account reports, and even run some of the automation I need to run when lead comes in to connect that that company data, that personal data to, I mean, we're even moving into directions now where we can now create basically complete chat GPT enabled email off the basics of what comes in that lead flow. And even the automated response feels completely personalized. So we're not going to live without that. We need that data, but it comes right back down to needs. And for anyone else that's already selling other technologies to people like me, have a good hard look at the value being extracted from that tool in those companies, because you should be able to predict churn if people aren't using it. We're very highly adopted on Zoominfo. So there's no chance we're ever going to move away from it. We need it. We need the data it provides, and we need the efficiency it gives us and the automation it gives us. So that makes it easy. You need to make sure your tools are being used that way by your customers, whether they be to your customers, whether you be sending B2B to people like me, or whether it's more like the customers that you support.
That's helpful. Thank you. And you touched on automation there. I really want to kind of talk about that and unpick that a little bit just for a couple of minutes. There are so many strategies that exist in the market. There's lots of ideas, there's books, there's theories, there's, ideas and tactics that are kind of like A/B testing various different things. Like, what are the things around automation that do you think that actually help create an environment to allow your sellers to be able to get to market first? Or what are the things that you think that maybe even something like Zoominfo gives you to be able to execute on those things very quickly?
So I think for us, what it helps us do is it helps us understand from the direction the lead came. It helps from the direction the lead came into a website, what content it came from, or where it's come from, where the source is. Figuring out what that tells us about it, what we can learn about that, what we already know, or what we can presume from it, using tools like Zoominfo to then sort of connect. Okay, taking this data, we can then produce a workflow and a sales play off the back of that, so that we can then be the first to get in touch with that lead, because we are under no illusions. We never believe that we're the only vendor on the planet that lead is registered to get that service. We know how important it is to follow up in the quickest possible time with the most relevance. And anything that automates that journey between the submission of that lead and the moment that rep picks it up, which you can then connect tools like Zoominfo, that's certainly the way we use it, to make sure the enrichment before you make that phone call is all done for you and then completely automated. That's going to help us not just get there first, but get there first with the most relevancy. And then, I mean, there's so much data to suggest why being that first mover makes the biggest difference. But if you can then add the relevancy to it, I think you've got a massive advantage. Yeah,
I love that. And James, just for the audience here, feel free to go to this to one of our landing pages. It's called zoominfo.com/plays. It's a free open sourced area for anyone to go to look at all the different types of go-to-market plays that exist or that could possibly be there. And we are always taking on new feedback for various different kind of new types of plays that we can actually kind of trigger and create. It's free to use, free to have a look at, and free to build off the back of that. We're now actually automating those plays directly into the Zoominfo SalesOS platform. So with the workflows that Grant is talking about, Mark and his customer success team are going to be training and enabling MessageBird users of Zoominfo as to how to activate that very quickly. So that first mover advantage is even done before they've woken up in the morning to get to the desk with their coffee to be ready for a list of deals or opportunities to work on. You're on mute again, my friend. That facial, I think, has gone to...
Amazing. Are we going to call that, Ali? Amazing. Are we going to call that? Are we going to call that a wrap? I'm just mindful of time.
Yeah, happy to call it a wrap. I think there's a couple of questions. I'll try and answer them afterwards.
Let's take the questions off. And what I'd suggest is I'll summarise those questions so that we can respond accordingly. So thank you, Kevin, Billy, David, and Habi. Just so you're aware, Ali tends to get around at some of the sales confidence events. So does Grant every so often. The next one's on the Wednesday, the 19th of April. In the meantime, connect with them all on LinkedIn, and also go and check out zoominfo.com/plays.
That's the one.
Because you're going to get a lot of valuable information. Also, let's just bring up Mark just so we can say hello. And I just want to congratulate each of you on your preparation and support. And thank you for the whole audience for hanging around, listening in, and enjoying our content. We just want to hold there one moment and we will close it down.